Sign the contract. The council elder sneered, sliding the paper across the table toward Alexander Romano. Or we vote you out tonight. A man who cannot produce an heir has no business leading this family. You are already dead to us. Alexander's jaw tightened. Every man in that room watched him, waiting for him to break. And for the first time in 20 years, the most feared boss in Chicago felt something he had almost forgotten. Shame. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. And drop a comment telling us what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The night Alexander Romano's empire nearly collapsed began with a vote. Not a gunfight, not a rival's blade, not an informant's whisper to the FBI. It began in a room full of old men in expensive suits who had decided quietly and collectively that Alexander had become a liability. He sat at the head of the table as he always did back. Straight expression, unreadable eyes moving slowly across each face in the room. The Romano Family Council met on the first Thursday of every month in the private dining room of a lakefront restaurant that no one outside their world knew existed. The staff had been trained not to listen. The security cameras had been disabled years ago. What happened in that room stayed in that room, or at least it was supposed to. Carlo Vitale, the eldest advisor on the council and the man who had served 3 Romano bosses before Alexander, placed both hands flat on the table and cleared his throat. He was 71 years old. He had survived 4 assassination attempts and 2 federal investigations. He was not a man who frightened easily, but what he was about to say made his hands tremble slightly. We need to talk about succession, Carlo said. Alexander did not move. We talk about succession every year, Carlo. This year is different. How? It was not a question. The word landed in the room like a dropped weapon. Carlo straightened his back. Around him, the other 6 men at the table looked at the wall, the table, their own hands anywhere but at Alexander. The Marchetti family approached us last week privately. They believe, and they are not alone in this belief, that without a confirmed heir, the Romano Empire is a structure without a foundation. They are considering withdrawing their alliance. Let them. Alexander. Carlo's voice dropped. If Marchetti goes, DeVito follows. If DeVito follows, we lose protection on the South Corridor. The whole network starts unraveling. This is not about pride. This is about the survival of everything your father and grandfather built. Silence. Alexander reached forward and picked up his water glass. He took one slow sip, set it down precisely where it had been. And your solution is what exactly? Carlo exchanged a glance with the man to his left. Marriage, Vanya. A legitimate, publicly announced marriage to a woman from an accepted family, followed by some arrangement. Adoption. A surrogate. Whatever can be managed. The optics need to change. The council needs to see a family at the head of this organization. I've been presented with daughters from 7 families in the past 3 years, Alexander said. Explain to me why none of those conversations went anywhere. Because you ended them, said a younger man at the far end of the table. Donovan Reese, 34, the council's financial strategist, and in Alexander's private assessment, the most ambitious person in the room. Every single time, you ended them within the first meeting. I ended them because every single woman walked into the room and looked at me like I was a problem she was being asked to solve, Alexander said. Like I was a contract, like my life was an inconvenience she was being compensated to tolerate. I will not bring a woman into this house who sees me as a transaction. With respect, Donovan said, and his tone made clear he was about to be disrespectful. You don't have the luxury of sentiment anymore. You're 39 years old. You're running out of time. The council isn't asking for a love story. We're asking for stability. Alexander looked at him, just looked at him, and something in that look made Donovan pick up his pen and study it. I'll make my own decision, Alexander said, on my own timeline. Your timeline, Carlos said quietly, ends at the next summit. 3 months. That's what the council is prepared to offer. Alexander stood. Every man at the table sat straighter without meaning to. Then I have 3 months, he said. He buttoned his jacket. If there's nothing else. There is one more thing, Donovan said. He opened a folder and slid a single photograph across the table. We've been having a problem with a man named Kevin Marsh, mid-level. Used to run collections for DeVito before he freelanced his way out of that arrangement. He moved a significant amount of product through 3 of our distribution points without authorization and then disappeared. Approximately $400,000 has not been accounted for. Alexander looked at the photograph. Kevin Marsh was 33, dark hair, average face. The kind of man you forgot immediately after meeting him. Find him. We're looking, but we found something else first. Donovan slid a second photograph across. A woman, candid shot from a distance outside a grocery store. She was carrying a reusable shopping bag in one arm and holding the hand of a small child with the other. She looked tired. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in several days. She looked, even in a surveillance photograph taken from 40 feet away, like someone who was holding everything together through sheer willpower. Emily Carter, 29, former girlfriend of Kevin Marsh. She lives in a two-bedroom apartment in Logan Square, works the morning shift at a diner on Milwaukee Avenue, and picks up weekend shifts at a laundromat 3 blocks from her building. She has a daughter, 7 years old, named Lily. Alexander studied the photograph for a moment. You think she knows where he is? She has to know something, Donovan said. They were together for 2 years. He was using her address as a forwarding point for at least part of the money. Legally, that creates a problem for her. Legally, Alexander repeated. She signed in for 2 packages. She claims she didn't know what was in them. Possibly true. Doesn't matter. It matters, Alexander said, and he took the photograph from the table before Donovan could reach for it. He studied it for another moment, the woman, the child, the shopping bag, the exhaustion that lived in her posture, even in a still image. And then he folded it and placed it in his inside jacket pocket. I'll handle it myself. He left the room before anyone could respond. In the car on the way home, Alexander sat in silence with his driver Marcus, who had worked for him for 11 years and understood that silence was the correct response to most things. The photograph was in Alexander's pocket, but he didn't look at it again. He didn't need to. He had a precise memory. He could see her face clearly, the set of her jaw, the way her hand gripped her daughter's, without looking down, automatic, instinctual, a grip that said, I know where you are, and I will not let go. He had met a lot of people in his life who claimed they would do anything for the people they loved. He had met very few who actually meant it. He was fairly certain that woman meant it. He did not examine why that mattered to him. Marcus pulled up to the mansion, a 12,000 square foot property in Lincoln Park that had been in the Romano family for 3 generations, and Alexander went inside without speaking. The household staff had long since learned that his return from council meetings required a 2-hour buffer before anyone spoke to him about anything. He went to his office on the 2nd floor. He sat at his desk. He placed the photograph on the surface in front of him and finally looked at it again. Emily Carter, 2 jobs, 1 child, disappeared boyfriend with $400,000 of Romano money. He made a decision that surprised even him. He would go himself. He would not send an enforcer. He would not have Marcus make a phone call. He would go to her apartment, knock on her door, and see what happened when a woman who had been surviving on nothing but nerve and stubbornness came face to face with the man her former boyfriend had stolen from. He told himself it was because he wanted to assess the situation directly. He did not examine reason. Emily Carter had no idea what was coming. She had spent the past 3 weeks moving through her days with the specific, concentrated focus of someone trying very hard not to panic. Kevin was gone. She understood that now. She had spent the first week convinced he was coming back, the second week angry, and the third week simply trying to calculate what his absence meant for her situation. What it meant was this: he had been contributing $800 a month toward the rent, and now he wasn't. And her 2-bedroom in Logan Square cost $1,700, and she made just under $2,200 a month across both jobs before taxes, which meant that after rent, she had approximately $217 for food, utilities, transportation, and everything else a 7-year-old required. She was not going to make it. She was not going to say that out loud. She had not said it to her sister, who would panic. She had not said it to her mother, who would say, I told you so. She had not said it to Lily, who was 7, and who deserved to believe that everything was fine. She was sitting at the kitchen table at 10:45 on a Tuesday night after Lily was asleep, working through her budget on a legal pad for the 4th time that week, as though rearranging the numbers might change them. The pencil moved. The numbers stayed the same. When the knock came at her door, she assumed it was Mrs. Petrakis from downstairs, who sometimes came up late when she couldn't sleep. She opened the door without thinking about it, and the man standing in her hallway was not Mrs. Petrakis. He was tall, dark-suited. He had the kind of presence that changed the air in a room, or in this case a hallway, the sense that this person occupied more space than their physical body required. He was looking at her with dark, unreadable eyes, and he was alone, which somehow made it worse because she had expected if she'd had any warning, if she'd thought for even 1 second guards, a team of people, a formal, terrifying entourage. She knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name in the way that everyone knows the names of things they are supposed to stay far away from. Her blood pressure spiked in a single nauseating rush. "I'd like to come in," he said. She stopped. Her mind was moving very fast, cycling through everything she knew about Kevin, about those packages, about the 2 months she had spent trying to ask Kevin what he was involved in and accepting his vague, deflecting answers because she didn't want to know. She really didn't want to know. And now she was standing in her doorway at 10:45 at night with Alexander Romano asking to come inside her apartment. "My daughter is asleep," she said. Something shifted in his expression. "I'll keep my voice down." That's not what I meant." She pressed the door against her body without closing it. "What do you want?" "To have a conversation, that's all. People who just want conversations don't show up at someone's home at this hour." "I apologize for the time." He said it simply without the edge of someone performing courtesy. He actually sounded for a moment as though he meant it. "I find I work better without an audience." She studied him for another moment. Her mind ran through her options and came up with very few that were good. She stepped back and let him in. She did not offer him coffee. She stood in the center of her small living room with her arms crossed and waited. He looked at the space without commenting on it, the bookshelves built from planks and cinder blocks, the second-hand couch with a blanket thrown over the arm, the drawings on the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway, Lily's name spelled out in purple crayon across the bottom of a picture of what appeared to be a horse, but might have been a dog. "Kevin Marsh owed my organization a significant amount of money," Alexander said. "When he disappeared, 2 parcels that had passed through your address became part of our accounting problem. I didn't know what was in them." "I know." She blinked. "Then why are you here?" "Because Kevin Marsh signed your address, which means to certain people in my organization, your address is a loose end. I'm here to determine what kind of loose end you are." The temperature in his room seemed to drop. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning there are 2 ways this situation can be resolved." He sat down in the chair across from the couch without being invited to, which under any other circumstances would have annoyed her. "One involves you telling me everything you know about where Kevin went, who he was meeting with, and what he was planning. In exchange, your name is removed from the accounting problem entirely." "And the other way?" He looked at her steadily. "The other way is more complicated and less comfortable for everyone." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining a situation. That's a very careful distinction." "Yes," he said, and for a fraction of a second she thought she saw something move behind his eyes. Not warmth exactly, but something that wasn't entirely cold. "It is." She sat down on the edge of the couch because her legs were beginning to shake, and she refused to let him ping that while she was standing. "I don't know where Kevin is. I genuinely do not know. He left on a Sunday 3 weeks ago. He said he was going to pick up coffee. He never came back. He didn't call. He didn't text. His phone goes straight to voicemail. I didn't even know he was involved with..." She stopped. "Say it." "I didn't know he was involved with organized crime," she said, and her voice stayed steady, which she was proud of. "I knew he was doing something he shouldn't have been. I asked him to stop. He said it was already over. Apparently it wasn't." "No," Alexander said, "it wasn't. He left me with his half of the rent unpaid and disappeared. So whatever Kevin told you or whoever he told about me, I am not his partner. I'm the person he left holding the bill." The silence that followed was long enough that she had to work to keep herself from filling it. "You're not afraid of me," he said finally. "I'm terrified of you. You don't look it." "I'm a single mother of a 7-year-old, she said. "I have been afraid of things every single day for the past 7 years. I learned a long time ago that looking afraid only makes things worse." Something happened in his expression again, that fractional shift there and gone. "How much is the back rent?" She stared at him. "What? Kevin owed you $800 a month toward the rent. How many months?" That's not what we were discussing." "How many months?" She pressed her lips together. 2, since January, plus this month is going to be short. So approximately $2,400. "You don't need to." "I didn't ask whether I needed to." He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope and set it on the coffee table between them. That's 5,000. It covers what he owes you and gives you a buffer. She looked at the envelope. She did not touch it. Why am I? Because you're not the person who wronged me. Kevin Marsh wronged me. You were collateral. And what do you want in return for that? Right now, nothing. I want to know if Kevin contacts you. I want you to call this number immediately if he does. He produced a card and set it beside the envelope. That's all. That's all, she repeated, and she could hear the skepticism in her own voice. I understand why you doubt that. Do you? Yes. He stood. He buttoned his jacket with the precise, unhurried movements of someone who had never been rushed in his life or had trained himself to appear that way. I'll show myself out. He was almost at the door when she spoke. Mr. Romano. He stopped. How did you know he was contributing $800 a month? He turned back. His expression was unreadable. I did my research. Before you came here? Yes. So you already knew I didn't have anything to do with what he did? A pause. Yes. Then why come here at all? Her voice was quiet, not accusatory, genuinely asking. If you already knew I was just collateral, why come yourself? He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said something she did not expect. Because your name was on a document that created a risk for you, and I wanted to see what kind of person was attached to that name. And now I know, he said and left. She sat in her living room for a full 10 minutes after the sound of his footsteps faded on the stairs. Then she looked at the envelope on the coffee table. Then she looked at the card. Then she picked up both and sat back and tried to understand what had just happened. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She stared at it, then answered. One more thing, said Alexander Romano's voice in her ear. The packages Kevin had sent to your address. 2 men from my organization's peripheral contacts may come to ask you about them. If they do, tell them you don't know anything, because you don't. And if they don't believe me, they will, because I'll make it very clear that your involvement ends with Kevin's name and an address he borrowed. But if they push call the number on that card, Mr. Romano, you don't owe Kevin Marsh anything, he said. Whatever you felt for him, whatever you thought you were building with him, he made his choice. And it wasn't you. She didn't respond. She was not going to cry in front of a man she had known for 45 minutes, even if that man was on the phone and couldn't actually see her. Good night, Ms. Carter. The call ended. She sat for a very long time. In the bedroom at the end of the hallway, Lily coughed once in her sleep and turned over. The small, ordinary sound of it broke something loose in Emily's chest. She put her head in her hands. She did not cry, but she came very close. 3 days later, a man knocked on her door at noon. He was not Alexander Romano. He was a thick-necked, flat-eyed man who introduced himself as being from a collections concern and wanted to talk about 2 packages. Emily stood in her doorway and said she didn't know anything about any packages. He pushed. She held firm. He pushed harder. And then his phone rang. He answered it. His face changed. He looked at Emily with something that was almost not quite, but almost apology. Then he said, "Have a good afternoon," and walked away. She closed her door and leaned against it and breathed. She pulled out the card with the number on it. She had not called it. She had not needed to. She put it back in her pocket. She did not throw it away. That should have been the end of it. It was not the end. 2 weeks later, Emily received a voicemail from an unknown number. The voice was Kevin's. His tone was thin, slightly breathless, like a man making a call from somewhere he was not supposed to be. "Emily, I know I have no right to call. I know that. I need you to listen. I left you in a bad spot and I'm sorry. I'm going to make it right. There's money coming. But right now I need a favor. The guys I work for, they're looking for something that I have. Something important. I need you to hold on to it for me. Just for a week. I'll send someone to pick it up and then this is all over and I will make everything right. I promise." The message ended. She listened to it twice. Then she did something that surprised her. She called the number on Alexander Romano's card. He answered on the second ring. "Kevin left a voicemail," she said. A brief silence. "What did it say?" She told him exactly, word for word. "Did he say what he wants you to hold?" "No. If he contacts you again, don't agree to anything. Don't let anyone into your apartment." "I wasn't planning to." "I know you weren't." She could hear something in his voice, not quite warmth, something slower than that, consideration. "You did the right thing calling." "I wasn't doing it to be helpful to you," she said. and felt immediately that she should probably not have said that to Alexander Romano. But he said, "I know that too," and he didn't sound offended. He sounded, if anything, slightly amused, which was somehow more unsettling. She hung up. She sat at her kitchen table with the legal pad in front of her, and the numbers were still the numbers, and Lily was at school and the apartment was very quiet. She thought about a man who showed up at her door at 10:45 at night, who sat in her chair and explained a situation and left $5,000 on her coffee table and called to make sure she was protected. She thought about the way he'd said your name was on a document that created a risk for you. The matter-of-fact responsibility of it, as though protecting people from problems was simply a thing that needed to be done. She thought about the question she'd asked him, why come at all, and the answer he'd given. I wanted to see what kind of person was attached to that name. She did not know what any of it meant. She picked up her pencil and went back to the numbers. The numbers still didn't work. And somewhere across the city, in a 12,000 square foot house that had never once felt like a home, Alexander Romano sat at his desk and looked at a city map with Kevin Marsh's last known location circled in red. But his mind, in the spaces between strategy, kept returning to an apartment in Logan Square, to a woman who said she was terrified and looked him in the eye anyway, to a 7-year-old's drawing of something that was either a horse or a dog taped to a refrigerator door with a magnet shaped like a sun. He had spent years making decisions in this city, big ones that moved money and power and sometimes ended things. He told himself this was just another one. He told himself that for 4 days. Then he picked up his phone and called the number on a card he had given to a woman who said she wasn't doing it to be helpful to him. She answered on the third ring. "Has Kevin contacted you again?" he said, because that was the professional reason for the call. "No," she said. A pause. "Good." Another pause. Longer. "Is that all you were calling about?" she said. He should have said yes. He said, "Your daughter, Lily, does she like school?" The silence on the other end of the line was so complete that he thought the call had dropped. Then very carefully, Emily Carter said, "Yes, she loves it." "Why?" "Just making sure the situation hasn't affected her routine." It was a thin excuse and they both knew it. "She's fine," Emily said. Her voice had something in it he couldn't quite identify. Not warmth, not yet, but the door to warmth slightly open. "She made a new friend last week, a girl named Sophia. Apparently they both like horses." "The drawing on the refrigerator," he said before he could stop himself. Another silence. "You noticed that," Emily said. "I notice most things." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was the closest thing to one he'd heard in a very long time. "Good night, Mr. Romano." "Good night, Ms. Carter." He set the phone down. Outside his window, Chicago was doing what Chicago always did, loud, complicated, enormous, full of people who were fighting and loving and losing and surviving all at once. He did not know what he was doing. I knew he was going to do it again. Kevin Marsh's voicemail sat in Emily's phone like a grenade with the pin already pulled. She had listened to it 4 times. Each time she told herself she was listening for details for something useful, something she could hand off to Alexander Romano and be done with this entire situation. Each time what she actually heard was the voice of a man she had spent 2 years believing, and the specific nauseating quality of his lies had not changed at all. Kevin had always sounded sincere. That was the thing about him. He could make you believe the floor was solid right up until the moment you fell through it. She deleted the voicemail. Then she sat at her kitchen table and waited for something to happen the way you wait. When you know the storm has already made landfall and it's only a matter of time before it reaches your street. It took 6 hours. The knock at her door came at 4 in the afternoon while Lily was still at school and Emily had 40 minutes before she needed to leave to pick her up. 2 men. Neither of them was the flat-necked collector from before. These 2 were different, quieter, more careful, the kind of men who understood that visible aggression was a blunt instrument and they were supposed to be surgical. The one in front said his name was Price. He said Kevin Marsh owed people money and those people believed Emily might be holding something of value that Kevin had intended to send through her address. "I'm not holding anything," Emily said. "Kevin called you yesterday," Price said. Her stomach dropped. She kept her face still. "Kevin called a lot of people. We dated for 2 years. He left you a message." "He left me a message saying he was sorry and that he was going to make things right." She crossed her arms, which is exactly what Kevin always says before he disappears again. I've heard that speech before. Price studied her. His partner had not spoken. His partner was looking at the apartment behind her with the professional attention of someone cataloging exits. Ms. Carter, we're not here to hurt you. We just need to know if Kevin told you where he put something. He didn't. If he contacts you again, I have a 7-year-old daughter, Emily said, and her voice went flat and hard in a way she had not planned, but did not apologize for. Whatever Kevin got himself into has nothing to do with her. I want that to be very clear to whoever sent you here. Price looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a card and held it out. If Kevin contacts you, again call this number. There's a significant finder's fee for anyone who helps us locate what he took. She took the card without looking at it. Good afternoon, she said, and closed the door. She stood with her back against it for 30 seconds. Then she pulled out her phone and called Alexander. He answered immediately. Tell me. 2 men. They said Kevin called me, which means someone is monitoring my phone, or Kevin told them he reached out. They were looking for something he took. Something specific, not just the money. Did they threaten you? Not directly. Description. She gave it. Both men. What they were wearing. The exact words Price had used. A silence. Then Alexander said, don't open your door to anyone you don't recognize until I tell you otherwise. I'm sending someone to your building. I don't need Emily. He said her name the same way he said everything, without inflection, but with a weight underneath it that changed the air. Kevin didn't just take money from my organization. He took something else. Something that, if it reaches the wrong people, creates a problem that affects a great many more lives than his. The men who came to your door today are not from my organization. Do you understand what I'm telling you? She understood. Kevin had stolen from multiple people, and now both sides of that theft knew where to find her. Yes, she said. Good. Stay inside until Marcus gets there. Who is Marcus? My driver. He's been with me for 11 years. He's safe. A pause. You can trust him. She noted that he did not say, you can trust me. She noted that she already did, which was possibly the most bewildering thing that had happened in a month full of bewildering things. Marcus arrived in 20 minutes. He was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-50s with a calm face and a way of standing near a door that suggested no one was getting through it. He introduced himself, briefly said he'd drive her to pick up Lily from school, and did not ask any questions, which she appreciated more than she could have explained. In the car, Lily decided immediately that Marcus was her favorite person. She asked him if he had ever driven a race car. He said not exactly. She asked if he could drive one if he needed to. He said probably yes. She said that was basically the same thing. Marcus caught Emily's eye in the rearview mirror, and something in his expression said quietly, I see why he cares about this one. Emily looked out the window and told herself she had not heard that thought. That evening, after Lily was in bed, Emily sat across from Marcus at her kitchen table and said, Tell me about him. Marcus considered the request with the seriousness it deserved. What do you want to know? How long has he been what he is? He took over from his father at 27. His father died of a heart attack, not in the way most people in that position die. Alexander had been running operations for 3 years before that. He was ready. And the thing the council talks about, the heir. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He was ambushed when he was 32, a rival faction that wanted to destabilize the Romano leadership. 2 of his men were killed. He was shot twice. One of the injuries, the doctors explained what it meant for his future. Marcus paused. He never talks about it. I've worked for him for 11 years. He has never mentioned it to me directly, but I was there when the doctors told him, and I have never in 11 years seen him look like that again. Emily said nothing. He's not what people think he is, Marcus said. Not defensive, just factual. He is hard. He has made hard decisions. But the cruelty that people attribute to him, most of it is performance. Most of it is the armor that keeps the structure standing. And underneath the armor, Marcus looked at her. Underneath the armor is a man who has not had anyone in his corner for a very long time. He stood and picked up his coffee cup and rinsed it at the sink. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. She sat at the table for a long time after he left. She thought about armor. She thought about the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from holding yourself together so long that you can no longer tell where the effort ends and you begin. She recognized it. She had been doing it for 7 years. The next morning brought Alexander Romano to her door in person, and this time he arrived at a reasonable hour, and this time he had information. Kevin took a hard drive, Alexander said, standing in her kitchen while she made coffee because she had offered out of reflex and he had accepted, which had surprised her. It contains financial records from 3 organizations, including mine. If that drive reaches federal investigators, a significant number of people go to prison. Kevin knew exactly what he was taking and exactly what it was worth. He sold it, Emily said. It was not a question. He sold a copy. He still has the original. He's using it as leverage. Alexander accepted the coffee she held out and wrapped both hands around the cup, and for a moment looked almost like someone who had not slept. The men who came to your door are working for a man named Gallo. He's the one who bought the copy. He wants the original so he controls the narrative. And you want it so no one goes to prison. Among other reasons, yes. Where does Kevin think he can go with this? Away. Alexander's voice was flat. He thinks he can take enough money from enough parties and disappear. He's not wrong that the plan could work. He's wrong that anyone would let him execute it. She poured her own coffee. Why are you telling me all of this? He looked at her across her kitchen. Because if Kevin contacts you again, you need to understand the full weight of what he's asking you to be part of. He's going to try to use you. He's going to use the 2 years you shared and the guilt he knows he owes you, and he's going to ask you to hold something or carry something or say something, and I need you to know exactly what that something is before he does. She wrapped her hands around her mug. And if I said I wanted nothing to do with any of this, I would arrange for you and your daughter to stay somewhere safe until this is resolved. Like a safe house. Like a comfortable house in a safe neighborhood with Marcus outside and no one knowing where you are. In Lily's school, arrangements can be made. She studied him. He was standing in her kitchen in a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, drinking coffee from a mug that said, "World's okay as human" on it, because it had been a gift from her sister, and he looked completely unbothered by the juxtaposition, which somehow made her want to laugh, which was not an appropriate response to any of this. "I'm not going to run," she said. Something shifted in his expression. "I didn't think you would. I want this finished. I want Kevin to face whatever he needs to face, and I want his mess cleaned up so that my daughter and I can go back to being ordinary. That's all I want." That's a reasonable thing to want. Can you make it happen? Yes. One word, no qualification, no performance. Just yes delivered with the specific confidence of someone who had never once in his life said, "I'll try." She believed him. She was not sure what that said about her. 3 days later, Kevin called again. Not a voicemail this time, a live call from a number she didn't recognize. "Emily." He sounded more strained than before. "Emily, please don't hang up." "I'm not hanging up," she said. She was in her bedroom with the door closed, and she was completely calm because she had spent 3 days preparing for this moment. "What do you want, Kevin?" "I need you to do something for me. Just one thing. You'll never have to hear from me again after this, I swear to you." "What thing?" "There's a storage unit on Fullerton, Unit 47. I need you to go there and pick up a bag and take it to—" "No," she said. Silence. "Emily." "No, Kevin. I'm not going to any storage unit. I'm not picking up any bag. I'm not taking anything anywhere. I have a daughter who needs me standing up and not sitting in a federal interrogation room because I touched something I had no business touching. The bag isn't— I don't care what's in the bag." Her voice was steady. She was proud of how steady it was. "You left me. You left me with the rent and the bills and a 7-year-old who kept asking where you went, and I covered for you. I made up a story that wouldn't break her heart. And then men started showing up at my door because of you, so I don't owe you this. I don't owe you anything." Kevin was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted softer. Carefully calibrated the tone she recognized from 100 arguments they'd had, the voice he used when he was about to say the thing he knew would work. "I know, you're right. You don't owe me anything. But Lily, do not," she said, and the steadiness cracked just slightly, just enough for the heat to show through. "Do not put her name in this conversation. I was going to say she deserves better. She deserves more than what you can give her right now. Now, I know how tight things are. I know you're working 2 jobs and still coming up short. The bag I'm talking about, there's money in it, Emily. Enough money that you never have to do the math again. Ever." The silence stretched. She could feel the pull of it, not because she wanted to help Kevin, but because the math was real and the exhaustion was real, And she had been doing the math for so long. Kevin, she said very quietly, tell me where you are. What? Tell me where you are right now. If you want my help, tell me where you are. A pause. Why? Because I want to understand what kind of trouble you're actually in. Another pause. He was thinking. She could hear him thinking. I'm at a motel off 94. I can't tell you which one they might be monitoring your... They are monitoring my phone, she said. So whatever you were about to ask me to do, they would have known the moment I did it. You would have been handing me to both sides of your problem, Kevin. Do you understand that? You would have used me as bait. The silence this time was different, heavier. That wasn't. Goodbye, Kevin. She ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed. Then she picked up Alexander's card and called. He answered before the second ring. I heard, he said. You were listening. We had a trace on the incoming call. I needed to know if he'd give a location. A pause. He didn't. He tried to use Lily, she said. A silence. Then in a voice that was very quiet and very controlled, Alexander said, I know. He almost worked, she said, because she was honest, because she was too tired not to be. For about 4 seconds. But he didn't. No, because you're smarter than he is. She laughed. It was small and slightly broken around the edges, but it was real. I don't know about smarter, just more experience with the way he operates. That's the same thing what Alexander said, and there was something in his voice, not quite warmth, but warmth's older sibling, the one who has been around long enough to know when to show up. Emily, the storage unit he mentioned, we're going to find it. When we do this is close to over. How close? Days, maybe less. She exhaled. Okay. How's Lily? The question landed differently than she expected. Simple, direct, genuine. She's good. She made Marcus teach her how to play cards last night. He let her win 3 rounds, and she absolutely knew he was letting her win, and she won anyway. Something happened in Alexander's voice. Not a laugh, but the shape of one. He's a good man. Yes, Emily said. He is. A pause. You surround yourself with good people, I noticed that. A longer pause than she expected. I try. Is it hard, in your world, finding people who are actually good? He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said, it is. She didn't say anything. She let the honesty of it sit there between them. Get some sleep, he said finally. Marcus is outside. I know. Lily waved at him out the window and he waved back. That shape in his voice again, closer to a laugh this time. Good night, Emily. She set the phone down and pressed her back against the headboard of her bed and looked at the ceiling and told herself very firmly that she was not in any kind of trouble with regard to Alexander Romano. She told herself that for approximately 12 minutes. Then she got up, checked on Lily, and went to bed. The storage unit on Fullerton was found the following afternoon. She knew because Alexander called her at 2:17 and said, "We found it." And his voice had a quality she had not heard in it before, not relief exactly, but the release of something that had been held very tightly for a very long time. Was the drive there? Yes. And Kevin? A pause. Kevin is currently explaining himself to several parties simultaneously. He is not in physical danger, but his options have narrowed considerably. What happens to him now? That depends on what he cooperates with. A brief silence. Emily, the drive contains information that, if handled correctly, can be used to close several investigations without exposing the parts of my organization that I need to protect. I'm going to make sure it's handled correctly. How? I have people in positions to ensure that. It requires certain arrangements. He paused. One of those arrangements involves appearing to be more stabilized than I currently appear to the outside world. She waited. The council has given me 3 months, he said, to present a more settled position. The word they use is family. She said nothing. I'm not asking you to agree to anything tonight, he said, and his voice was careful in a way that she recognized the care of someone who has been turned down enough times to know how to hold the ask loosely. I'm only telling you that a situation exists and that you came to mind. I came to mind, she repeated. Yes, because I'm convenient. No, he said it without hesitation, because in 3 weeks I have watched you face down collectors, manage an informant, ex-boyfriend, protect your daughter without letting her see you frightened and make decisions under pressure that most people I employ would struggle with. That is not convenience, that is character. She was quiet. Think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. He ended the call, which she suspected was intentional, giving her the last word of silence so she could not immediately say no. She sat with it. She thought about the math. She thought about Lily's face when Emily told her they'd have to move to a smaller apartment. She thought about the school Lily loved, and the friend named Sophia, and the teacher who had written on Lily's last report card that she had a remarkable capacity for empathy. She thought about a man who held a coffee mug that said, "World's okay as human," and looked completely unbothered. She thought about armor, about the exhaustion of holding yourself together. She thought about two broken people. She picked up her phone. "I have conditions," she said when he answered. "A beat. Tell me." Lily's life doesn't change. Her school, her routine, her friendships, nothing is disrupted. She doesn't know what this arrangement is. As far as she's concerned, it is real. Agreed. I have my own space. I'm not, she stopped. Restarted. This is a contract, not a performance. I won't be asked to perform things that aren't real. Agreed. And when the time comes, whenever this ends, I leave with enough to give her a real start. Not survival money, a real start. More than enough, he said. I'll have the contract drawn up. Alexander, he waited. Why me, honestly, not the character speech? Why me specifically? A long pause, longer than any pause she'd heard from him. Because you looked at me, he said finally, like I was a person, not a reputation, not a resource, not a problem. Another pause. I have not been looked at that way in a very long time. She closed her eyes. I'll review the contract, she said. She heard something settle in him through the phone, something that had been braced for impact and had found ground instead. I'll have it sent tomorrow. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Emily. She set the phone down. In the next room, Lily was talking in her sleep the way she sometimes did. Small murmured words that made no sense, and all the sense in the world. Emily pressed her ear to the wall for a moment just to hear it. Then she went back to the table, back to the legal pad, but this time she did not pick up the pencil. She sat with her hands flat on the table and looked at the wall and understood that she had just made a decision that was going to change everything. She was afraid. She was also underneath the fear, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Certain. Not about what came next, not about Alexander Romano or his world or the contract she hadn't yet signed. Certain about herself, about what she would and would not accept, about the woman she had become in the years she'd spent being told she was not enough. She was certain about that woman. That was more than she'd had yesterday. The contract arrived at 9 the next morning, delivered by a lawyer named Hartwell, who wore an excellent suit and a carefully neutral expression and asked no questions that weren't strictly necessary. Emily read every line. She asked 3 questions. Hartwell answered all 3 without hesitation, which told her Alexander had anticipated the questions. She signed it. Hartwell left. Emily stood in her kitchen in the silence that followed and took one long breath. Then Lily came out of her bedroom in her dinosaur pajamas and said, "Mom, can Marcus come to my school thing on Thursday? They said we could bring someone extra." Emily looked at her daughter, at the absolute certainty on that small face that the world would accommodate her request. "I'll ask him," Emily said. Lily nodded satisfied and went to find her shoes. Emily picked up her phone. She didn't call Marcus. She called Alexander. When he answered, she said, "Lily wants Marcus at her school thing on Thursday. Can he do that?" The pause was brief. "I'll make sure he's free." "Thank you," a beat. "Emily." His voice was different. The layer that was always guarded had shifted just a fraction. "Thank you for signing." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "I haven't moved in." "No," he said, "but you're going to." She almost argued. She didn't, because he was right. And somewhere in the space between the contract and the dinosaur pajamas and the 7-year-old who had already decided that Marcus was family, something had begun that neither of them had words for yet, but it had begun. Moving into Alexander Romano's mansion took exactly one afternoon and broke Emily's heart in exactly one way. Lily loved it immediately. She walked through the front door, looked up at the ceiling and said, "Mom, this is like a castle," with the complete sincerity of a 7-year-old who has just decided where she belongs. Then she found the staircase and asked if she could slide down the banister, and Marcus, who was carrying a box behind them, said, "That was an excellent question for Mr. Romano," which meant Marcus thought it was an excellent idea, and was wisely removing himself from the decision chain. Alexander was standing in the entrance hall when Lily turned and looked at him directly and said, "Are you the man my mom is going to marry?" The room went very still. Emily opened her mouth. Alexander crouched down so he was at Lily's eye level, which was not something she had expected him to do, and said, "Yes, is that all right with you?" Lily considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Do you like horses? I think they're remarkable animals. My teacher says that's what people say when they don't know anything about horses." Something moved in Alexander's face that Emily would spend a long time afterward trying to name. "Your teacher sounds smart." "She's the smartest person I know except my mom." Lily tilted her head. "You can learn about horses. I'll teach you." Then she turned and went back to examining the staircase banister. Alexander straightened up and looked at Emily. Emily looked back at him and said nothing because there was nothing to say that wasn't going to embarrass one of them. "She's extraordinary," he said quietly. "I know," Emily said. "She gets it from her grandmother. I just try to keep up." The first week in the mansion was an exercise in two people learning to exist in the same space without the tools they normally use to manage other people. Alexander was accustomed to compliance. Emily was accustomed to independence. Neither of those things was useful now. She reorganized the kitchen on the third day because the layout made no logical sense for a person who actually cooked. She asked the housekeeper, a quiet woman named Rosa, before she did it. Rosa looked as though no one had asked her permission for anything in 20 years and needed a moment to recover. Alexander came home at 7 that evening and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the rearranged counters. "You move things," he said. "The spices were next to the stove, which means they dry out faster," she said. "And the cutting boards were on the wrong side for a right-handed person." "I'm right-handed." "I know, that's why I moved them." She turned and handed him a plate. "Sit down." He looked at the plate. He looked at her. He sat down. She had made pasta. Nothing elaborate, a simple marinara with Italian sausage, the kind of thing she could make for $4 that tasted like she'd spent 40. She made it 3 times a week for Lily because Lily would eat it without negotiating. Alexander ate in silence for 2 minutes. Then he said, "This is the best thing I've eaten in 4 years." That's a very sad statement about 4 years. "I have a private chef." "I know, I met him. He's very talented. He's also cooking to impress you rather than to feed you. There's a difference." Alexander looked at her across the table. "You notice a great deal. Single mothers develop a very specific kind of attention," she said. "You learn to read rooms fast because you have to be 3 steps ahead of everything." "How long have you been doing this alone?" "Since Lily was 8 months old." She picked up her fork. Her father decided that fatherhood looked different than he'd expected. "He moved to Phoenix. He sends a card on her birthday, sometimes." A pause. "And you managed." "We managed." She corrected the pronoun instinctively. "Lily and I figured it out together. She was a very cooperative baby, which helped." "She has your character," he said. And the simplicity of it landed differently than a compliment usually does, because it wasn't delivered as flattery. It was delivered as observation, as fact. Emily looked down at her plate. "Thank you," she said. I don't say things to be kind," he said, as though reading the subtext of her thanks. "I say things that are true. It's a habit that makes me difficult to be around sometimes. I've noticed." "Does it bother you?" She thought about it honestly. "No, I spent 2 years with someone who said exactly what I wanted to hear. I'd rather have the truth even when it's uncomfortable." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll try to make sure the truths are worth the discomfort." She almost smiled. "That's a reasonable offer." Timestamp 8 minutes. The first test came 9 days after she moved in. It arrived in the form of a woman named Claudia Ferrante, who appeared at the mansion at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday, without an appointment, walked past the security staff, with the ease of someone who had done it many times, and found Emily in the kitchen, teaching Rosa how to make her mother's recipe for lemon pound cake, because Rosa had mentioned offhandedly that she'd always wanted to learn, and Emily had said, "Well, today's a good day." Claudia was 42, beautiful, in the sharp architectural way of a woman who had curated every detail of her appearance into a statement, and she looked at Emily with an expression that was precise and weaponized and almost friendly. "You must be the new wife," Claudia said. "I must be," Emily said. She kept her hands in the mixing bowl. "And you are?" "Claudia Ferrante. My family and Alexander's have been associated for a long time." She paused on the word associated the way you pause on a word that has a different and larger meaning underneath it. I've known Alexander for 15 years. That's a long time, Emily said agreeably. We were close at one point. Claudia moved to the counter and picked up a lemon from the bowl Emily had set out and turned it in her fingers. I want you to understand something, and I want to say it directly because I think you seem like a person who prefers directness. I do, Emily said. This arrangement you've made, whatever contract you signed, it won't last. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because I've watched Alexander function for 15 years, and I know exactly what he needs. And what he needs is not a waitress from Logan Square with a ready-made family. She set the lemon down. He needs someone who understands his world. Someone who has been part of it. Someone like you, Emily said. Someone like me, Claudia agreed without apology. Emily took her hands out of the bowl, wiped them on a dish towel, and turned to face Claudia fully. Rosa had gone very still near the oven. Can I ask you something, Emily said. Of course. If you know him so well, if you've been close for 15 years, if you understand his world and he needs someone like you. She tilted her head. Why is he married to me? Claudia's expression shifted. That's not a rhetorical question, Emily said. I'm genuinely asking, because from where I'm standing, a man who could have chosen the person who already knows his world and already fits his life, that man had a reason for choosing differently. The silence held. You should be careful, Claudia said. Her voice had lost its warmth. The world you've entered is not forgiving of naivety. I grew up poor, raised a child alone, and survived 2 years with Kevin Marsh, Emily said. I'm not naive, I'm just not impressed. She picked up the dish towel again. Rosa, can you add the zest now? Claudia left without another word. Another word, Rosa, once the front door had closed, looked at Emily with the expression of a woman who had needed to see that exact thing happen for a very long time. She has been coming to this house for years, Rosa said quietly. I know, Emily said. You can tell a lot about a person by what they stop doing when you stop needing them. Rosa nodded slowly. Then she zested a lemon with more enthusiasm than the task strictly required. Alexander heard about the visit from his security detail. He came to find Emily that evening and stood in the doorway of the sitting room where she was reading, while Lily did homework at the coffee table and said, I heard Claudia came by. She did. What did she say? The usual, Emily said without looking up from her book. That I don't belong here and this won't last, and she knows you better than I do. What did you say? I asked her why you married me instead of her. He was quiet. What did she say to that? She told me to be careful. Emily turned a page. Then she left. Lily looked up from her homework. Who's Claudia? Someone who stopped by, Emily said. Was she nice? Emily considered the honest answer. She was very direct. Lily processed this. Mrs. Okafor is very direct. I like her. She tells you what she thinks even when it's hard. She looked at Alexander. Do you like Claudia? Alexander looked at this 7-year-old who asked questions like a seasoned detective and said with complete seriousness, not especially. Lily nodded as though this confirmed something. Okay. She went back to her homework. Emily turned another page and did not look at Alexander, but her mouth curved. He sat down in the chair across from them. He did not take out his phone. He did not open his laptop. He sat in the same room while a child did homework and a woman read a book, and he was quiet, and it was the most at home he had felt in 11 years. Timestamp 18 minutes. The first major public test came with the Romano family dinner, which was not optional. Alexander explained it to Emily 4 days before it happened. It was an annual dinner hosted by his family's organization, not the full council, but the inner circle. 12 people. People who would assess her with the training and precision of professionals who had built careers on reading exactly what a person was and whether they were a threat. Tell me what you need from me, Emily said. Don't perform, he said. That's all. Every other woman I've brought into rooms like this has tried to be something other than what she was. They thought that was what survival required. He paused. It isn't. These people can smell performance from 30 feet. Just be what you are. What I am might make them uncomfortable. Good on, he said. Discomfort means they're paying attention. She bought a dress that was not expensive but was the right color. A deep burgundy that her friend Jess had told her years ago was the one color that made Emily look like she had decided something and no one was going to argue with her. She did her own hair and her own makeup, and she stood in front of the mirror in the bedroom and said to herself quietly, You are not auditioning. You are not here to be approved of. You are here because you belong here. She almost believed it. Almost was enough. The dinner was held at Alexander's estate in a dining room that Emily had avoided because it was the most formal room in the house and felt the least like anything she recognized. 12 people arrived over the course of 40 minutes. Alexander introduced her to each one. She shook hands, made eye contact, remembered names, and asked one genuine question of every person she met because her mother had told her a long time ago that the fastest way to make someone trust you was to make them feel interesting. It worked. By the time they sat down, she had learned that one man had a granddaughter who was 3 and was currently terrified of balloons, that another had been renovating a boat for 6 years and was beginning to suspect the boat was winning, and that the woman on Alexander's left, a sharp-featured woman named Adela, who ran the organization's legal operations, had just started learning Italian at 61 because she refused on principle to retire gracefully. Adela sat next to Emily at dinner and said, "Alexander hasn't smiled in a room like this in 4 years." Emily glanced down the table at him. He was not smiling now. He was listening to someone talk with the focused, contained attention he brought to everything. "He's not smiling now," Emily said. "No, but he's relaxed." Adela said it like it was a miracle. "Do you have any idea how long it has been since Alexander Romano was relaxed in a room full of people who need something from him?" Emily was quiet. "Whatever you did to get past that wall," Adela said, "don't stop doing it." And that was when Victor Marchetti arrived. He was not on the guest list. He walked in during the second course with 2 men behind him, and the temperature in the room changed the moment he appeared in the doorway. The specific drop that happens when someone enters a space and everyone in it immediately reassesses their position. Victor was 60 broad and carried his authority like a weapon. He'd been swinging so long he no longer noticed the weight of it. He looked at Alexander, then at Emily, and he smiled the kind of smile that meant he had come to do something specific and was already enjoying it. "Forgive the intrusion," Victor said, pulling out the empty chair across from Emily and sitting without being invited. "I heard Romano finally convinced a woman to take his name. I had to see it for myself." Alexander did not move. "Victor, Alexander." Victor poured himself wine from the bottle on the table. "This must be the girl." He looked at Emily with the measuring stare of someone pricing livestock. "You're younger than I expected." "Pretty enough, I suppose. A little rough around the edges." Emily put her fork down. "I heard you're a waitress," Victor said. "Is that right? 2 jobs, a child by another man." "That's right," Emily said. "And you think that's sufficient for this table, for this name?" "I think what's sufficient," Emily said, keeping her voice even, "is that the man at the head of this table decided it was. And his opinion is the only one that matters here." Victor's smile didn't waver. "The man at the head of this table is operating under the illusion that sentiment is a strategy. It isn't." He glanced at Alexander. "You brought a liability into your house and dressed it up as a wife. The council sees it. The families see it. You are weaker today than you were 6 months ago." "Be careful, Victor," Alexander said. His voice was so quiet it required the room's absolute attention to hear. "I'm being honest," Victor said, "which is more than anyone else at this table will do. Your girl is out of her depth. Your position is compromised. And the sentiment you're feeling right now," he gestured vaguely between Alexander and Emily, "is the thing that is going to get you killed." Alexander stood, and the room, all 12 people in it, went completely still. "This woman," Alexander said, and he did not raise his voice, which made every word heavier, "has shown more integrity in 3 weeks than I have seen from some people in 30 years of this life. She will be spoken to with respect in my house. She will be spoken to with respect everywhere my name reaches." He looked at Victor without blinking. "If you have concerns about my leadership, bring them to the council, formally, through the appropriate process, and I will address each one." A pause. "But do not sit at my table and speak about my wife the way you just did. Not ever again." Victor held the look for a long moment. The room waited. Then Victor stood, straightened his jacket, and left. The silence afterward lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then Adela picked up her wineglass and said, "Well, I believe that answers the question of whether his position is compromised," and took a long sip. The table exhaled. Emily picked up her fork. Under the table, Alexander's hand found hers and pressed once briefly, then released. She did not look at him. She ate her food and kept her face neutral and tried very hard to locate the part of herself that was not completely undone by that single moment of contact. She did not find it. It had apparently packed its things and left. Timestamp 28 minutes. Later that night, after the guests were gone and Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, Emily found Alexander in his office on the second floor. The door was open. She knocked anyway. "Come in," he said. She sat in the chair across from his desk. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. It may have made things harder with Victor. Victor has been making things hard for 3 years. He doesn't need a reason. He needs an obstacle." Alexander set down the papers he'd been holding. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she paused. "I'm angry. I'm fine and I'm angry, which is a combination I've had a lot of practice with." "Tell me about the angry part." She looked at him. "Men like Victor have been doing that my whole life, sizing me up and deciding I'm not enough. Not the right background, not the right income, not the right life. And the part that makes me angriest is that for years part of me believed them." Her voice was steady. She was past the place where that particular truth made her cry. "Kevin believed it too, which is part of why he left. He thought he could do better." "He was wrong," Alexander said. "I know that now." She met his eyes. "I knew it before tonight. But watching you stand up like that, it wasn't that I needed you to defend me. I was handling Victor fine." "You were," he agreed. "But there's a difference between handling something yourself and having someone stand next to you while you do it." She looked at her hands. "I haven't had that in a long time." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Neither have I." She looked up. "I have people who work for me," he said. "People who are loyal because loyalty is paid for, or because it's strategic, or because I've given them enough that they owe it to me. That's not the same thing as someone who stands next to you without calculating what it costs them." "I calculated," she said honestly. "When I signed the contract, I calculated everything." "I know. But tonight you weren't calculating." He held her gaze. "Tonight you sat across from a man who was trying to humiliate you and you didn't flinch. That wasn't the contract. That was you." She didn't answer. The honesty in the room was becoming something large, and she wasn't sure either of them was ready for how large it was becoming. "I'm going to bed," she said. He nodded. She stood and walked to the door and stopped. "Alexander?" "Yes." The hand under the table. She did not turn around. "Thank you for that." A silence. "You're welcome." She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time. 2 floors up, Lily slept with complete confidence, one arm wrapped around the stuffed horse she had named Romano, which she had named before. She knew that was anyone's last name, and had refused to rename afterward because she said it already knew its name and it wasn't fair to change it. Emily lay in the dark and thought about a man who stood up in front of 12 people and said this woman and meant it. She thought about the contract, about the 2 years, about the exit clause that she had insisted on and he had agreed to without arguing. She thought about how exits looked very different from where she was standing now than they had from Logan Square. She was not going to examine that thought. She closed her eyes. She was going to examine that thought. Timestamp 36 minutes. 3 days later, Donovan Reese called Alexander's cell at 6 in the morning, and Emily heard Alexander's voice change in the hallway outside her room. She had learned the register of his voices in 3 weeks of living in the same house, the way you learn a language faster when you're fully immersed, not because you're studying it, but because survival requires it. The voice he used in the hallway at 6 in the morning was not his business voice, or his careful voice, or his quiet warning voice. It was a voice she had not heard before. She got up. He was in the hallway with the phone to his ear, and when he saw her, he lowered it for a moment and said, "Go back to bed." "What happened?" He looked at her, then he said into the phone, "To the phone, I'll call you back," and ended the call. "What happened?" she said again. "Kevin Marsh," he said. "He's gone." "Gone how?" "Found this morning. He was trying to negotiate a separate deal with a third party we hadn't identified yet. It went badly." His voice was flat and careful, and she understood from the flatness that the information he was giving her was edited for her sake. "Is he dead?" she said. A pause. "Yes." She sat down on the hallway chair, a small bench that existed purely for the purpose of people taking off their shoes, which no one in this house actually did. She sat on it because her legs made a decision without her. "The hard drive," she said. "Your organization had it." "Yes, this changes nothing in terms of that. Kevin's death doesn't create new exposure. If anything, it closes a loop." He crouched in front of her, and the gesture was so unexpectedly human that she felt it in her chest. Emily, the threat to you and Lily from Kevin's situation is over. He cannot be used as leverage anymore. No one comes to your door about packages or storage units or phone calls. She looked at him. His face was very close and completely serious, and she was sitting on a shoe bench at 6 in the morning in her pajamas, and the world had just shifted again under her feet. I knew he was going to get himself killed, she said. Her voice was quiet, not grief exactly, but the weight of having been right about something you hoped you were wrong about. I knew it the first time he called. I could hear it. I know. I wasn't a bad person at the start, she said. He just kept making choices. Yes, Alexander said. That's usually how it goes. She looked at her hands. I'm not sad. I don't think I'm sad. I think I'm angry at the waste of it. He could have made different choices. Most people can, he said. They don't always. She nodded, she breathed. She gathered herself with the efficiency of someone who has been gathering herself under pressure for 7 years and has gotten quite fast at it. Does Lily need to know anything, she said. No, nothing about this touches her. Okay, she stood up. I'm going to start breakfast. He stood with her. He looked at her for a moment. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said. I want to. It's what I do in the morning. It's what makes the morning feel like morning. She looked at him. Come have coffee. He looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize, the look of someone who has been offered something ordinary and finds to their own surprise that ordinary is what they have been hungry for all along. Okay, he said. They went downstairs. Lily emerged 20 minutes later in her dinosaur pajamas, stopped at the kitchen doorway, and took in the scene of her mother making eggs and Alexander Romano sitting at the kitchen table with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up and a coffee mug in his hands, and said, You're here early. I live here, Alexander said. Lily considered this. I know, but usually you leave before I wake up. Not today. She climbed into the chair across from him. Can you make toast? I can try. The toaster is tricky. You have to hold the lever down a little longer than it feels right. I'll keep that in mind. Mom usually does it. Your mom is busy. Lily looked at him with the ancient, knowing eyes of a child who has been paying close attention. Are you going to keep being here in the mornings? He glanced at Emily, who had her back to them and was absolutely thoroughly focused on the eggs. I'm going to try, he said. Lily nodded. Okay, then she said, Romano, my horse, not you. She needs a new button eye. Do you know how to sew? No. That's okay, Mom will teach you. She taught Marcus and he's okay at it now. Emily pressed her lips together over a smile that had no business being that large at 6:45 in the morning, 3 weeks into a contractual marriage, the morning after finding out a man she'd once loved was dead. But there it was, the smile, real and unguarded and entirely her own. And across the kitchen with a coffee mug in his hands and a child explaining the philosophy of button eye replacement, Alexander Romano felt something crack open in his chest that had been sealed shut for so long he had stopped believing it could open at all. He did not name it yet, but it was there. And it was not going away. The button eye took 3 attempts and 1 broken needle, and Alexander Romano sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon with Rosa's sewing kit open in front of him, while Lily supervised with the patience of someone who had very low expectations that were slowly being exceeded. You're holding it wrong, Lily said. I'm holding it the way your mother showed me. Mom holds it differently. Your mother has been sewing since she was 8. I started 11 minutes ago. Lily considered this with the gravity of a fair-minded judge. That's a reasonable point. She watched him try again. Better. The button needs to be tighter or Romano will lose it again. Romano has now lost 3 button eyes in 4 months, Alexander said. I'm beginning to think Romano is not being careful with his eyes. Lily giggled. It was the first time he had made her laugh on purpose, and the sound of it did something to him that he was not prepared for. Something that moved in his chest with the force of something long buried finding its way back to the surface. Emily was watching from the doorway. She had not announced herself. She was leaning against the frame with her arms crossed and an expression on her face that she would have denied if he'd asked about it. He didn't ask. He finished the button eye with a knot Rosa would have described as passable, cut the thread, and held the horse out to Lily. Lily examined it with serious attention, pressed the button, turned the horse over, looked at the stitching from 2 angles. It'll hold, she said with the tone of a quality control inspector delivering a marginal pass. Then she hugged the horse to her chest and said, "Thank you, Alexander," and went back to her room. He turned around and found Emily watching him. "Don't," he said. "I didn't say anything." "You were about to." She smiled. It was the full one, the one that reached her eyes and had no performance in it. "I was going to say you did a good job with the knot. Rosa told me the knot was sloppy. Rosa has 30 years of experience. For 11 minutes, it was an excellent knot." She pushed off the door frame. "Come eat, I made soup." He followed her to the kitchen because that was what he did now. He followed her to the kitchen and sat down and ate soup that tasted like something a family was supposed to taste like. And he thought about the word family with the careful attention of a man who has been told his whole life that certain things do not belong to him. That was a Saturday. By Wednesday, everything had changed. Timestamp 6 minutes. Donovan Reese requested a private meeting Monday morning, which was not unusual. Donovan requested private meetings the way other people breathe constantly, and with the impression that the act itself was more important than whatever came of it. Alexander gave him 40 minutes in the office after breakfast, which Emily and Lily had occupied with a disagreement about whether cereal counted as a real breakfast or a placeholder for a real breakfast. The disagreement was ongoing and showed no signs of resolution. Donovan sat across from Alexander's desk and opened a folder and placed 3 photographs on the surface. "The Gallo organization," Donovan said, "did not dissolve when we recovered the hard drive. I want to be clear about that. We assumed they would retreat. They haven't." Alexander looked at the photographs. Security footage stills. 2 men outside Lily's school, 1 man outside the diner where Emily had worked before she moved into the mansion. When were these taken? The school Thursday, the diner Friday morning. We pulled the footage yesterday. Donovan's voice was carefully neutral. "They're not watching your operations, Alexander. They're watching your family." The word family landed the way it always did now, with a weight it hadn't carried 6 months ago. "Gallo," Alexander said. "His operation lost significant leverage when the hard drive came to us. He's been quiet for 3 weeks. We read the quiet as retreat. It wasn't retreat." Donovan paused. "It was planning." "What does he want?" He looked at the photograph of the man outside Lily's school again. The man was standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets. He looked ordinary. He looked like a parent waiting for pickup. "Double the security on the school," Alexander said. 2 additional people on Emily at all times, not visible, not in ways she notices. "I don't want her frightened. I want her protected." "And Gallo?" "I'll handle Gallo." He closed the folder. "Today." Donovan stood. He picked up the folder. He stopped at the door. "Alexander, there's one more thing." He turned back. "I ran a background on Gallo's operation this weekend. His money flow, his contacts, his history." He paused. "He had a connection to Kevin Marsh that predates Kevin working for DeVito. They go back 4 years. The packages Kevin sent through Emily's address, Gallo was the original client. Kevin was working for him before he came to us." Alexander looked at him. "Which means," Donovan said carefully, "Emily was not random. Kevin specifically chose her address because Gallo's people had already assessed the building and determined she was low risk. Quiet, unlikely to ask questions, no connections." He paused. "She was selected, and Gallo knows who she is and where she came from in considerably more detail than we initially thought." The silence in the room was absolute. "Get out," Alexander said quietly. Donovan got out. Alexander sat at his desk for 4 minutes and did not move. He went through everything he had told Emily about her involvement being accidental, about Kevin choosing her address because it was convenient, about the threat being resolved when they recovered the drive. He had believed that. He had believed it when he said it. He had been wrong. He got up and went to find Marcus. Timestamp 14 minutes. Emily noticed the new security within approximately 45 minutes, which was faster than anyone had predicted. She was walking back from the corner pharmacy she had gone for Lily's vitamin gummies because Lily had announced at breakfast that they were out with the urgency of someone reporting a structural failure, and she became aware of a man half a block behind her, maintaining a consistent distance with the particular quality of attention that was not casual. She walked into the pharmacy. She bought the vitamins. She walked back out. He was outside. She went back to the mansion, found Marcus at the front door and said, "Who's the man in the gray jacket?" Marcus looked at her. Then he said, "He's one of ours." "Since when do I have additional people?" "Since this morning." "Why?" "A beat. You should talk to Alexander." She found Alexander in his office. He looked up when she came in, and his expression told her everything before he said a word, which was that something had changed, and he had been managing the timing of telling her. "Tell me now," she said. She closed the door behind her. "Whatever it is, tell me." He told her, all of it. Kevin's connection to Gallo, the photographs outside the school, the timeline that suggested her involvement had never been accidental. She sat in the chair across from his desk and listened without interrupting. She was very still. The stillness of someone who is using all of their energy to process and leaving nothing for movement. When he finished, she said, "Kevin chose me on purpose." "Yes, that's what the evidence suggests." "I was with me for 2 years," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "He told me he loved me. He told me he wanted to build something with us. He was using my address as a drop-off point from the beginning, before we were even serious." "Yes." She looked at her hands. "I let him into my home. He met Lily. She called him Kevin and drew pictures for him and brought them home from school." Her voice did not break, but it came close in a way that was entirely different from the ordinary grief of a relationship ending. This was something colder. He was using her too. Her presence made the address look more domestic, more innocent. Alexander said nothing because there was nothing to say that wasn't smaller than what she just said. "I want to know about Gallo," she said. "Emily, I want to know what he wants and what your plan is and what the realistic risk is to Lily." Her eyes came up and found his. "I am in this now, fully. I have been since I signed that contract, and if I'm being honest, I was in it before I signed it the first night you showed up at my door. So don't manage me. Tell me what is happening." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he told her. Gallo wanted a council seat in the negotiating leverage to get one. He had calculated that Alexander, who had recently acquired a family, and therefore a vulnerability, could be pressured in ways that Alexander before Emily could not. He was going to try to engineer a situation. He had not yet moved, but the window was not large. "How do you stop him?" she said. "By making it very clear before he acts that moving against my family is not a calculation that ends in his favor." He paused. "I've requested a direct meeting. Through appropriate channels. That meeting is tomorrow. Will it work?" "It's a conversation. What happens after depends on what kind of man Gallo turns out to be. And if he's the wrong kind," Alexander's expression was even, "then other arrangements are made." "And I trust you," she said. "Yes," he said. "I would ask you to trust me." "You don't have to ask," she said. "You already have it." Something in his face shifted. Not the fraction she had learned to read. The full thing, an expression she had not seen on him before, open, unguarded, slightly undone. There and gone in 2 seconds, but she saw it. "Emily," he said. "Don't," she said, because she could feel where the conversation was about to go, and she was not ready for it in his office in the middle of a crisis. "Not now, later." He held her gaze. "Later," he agreed. She stood up. She squared her shoulders. She walked to the door. "Emily," his voice stopped her. She turned. "I'm sorry," he said, "about Kevin, about what it means that he chose you. You deserve none of that." She looked at him for a moment. "No," she said, "I didn't. But I got something else out of the wreckage that I didn't deserve either." She held his gaze. "So maybe it balances." She left before he could respond. She walked down the hall and stood in the bathroom with the door locked and let herself feel the full weight of what she had just learned about Kevin for exactly 4 minutes. 4 minutes of anger and grief and the specific bone-deep betrayal of realizing that a person you loved was a lie from the beginning. Then she washed her face. Then she went to pick up her daughter from school. Timestamp 24 minutes. The meeting with Gallo happened the next afternoon. Emily knew it was happening because Alexander told her and because she had asked him to. She sat in the mansion's kitchen and made focaccia from a recipe her mother had given her, which was what she did when she was afraid but needed her hands occupied, and Rosa sat with her and pretended to inventory the pantry. They did not speak about the meeting. They talked about Rosa's daughter, who was getting married in September, and whether a September wedding in Chicago was a reasonable gamble. Weather-wise, in Rosa's opinion, that any wedding without at least 3 kinds of cold cuts at the reception was a wedding making a significant error. Alexander came home at 4:15. He came directly to the kitchen. He stood in the doorway, and his expression was the careful, neutral expression he wore when the outcome was not simple. Emily looked at him over Rosa's head. "Well," she said, "the conversation was clear," he said. "He understands the parameters." "But," He came into the kitchen and sat down. Rosa found an urgent reason to check something in the laundry room. Gallo is not an irrational person. He's a strategic one. He heard everything I said and agreed to everything I said, and he meant roughly 60% of it. Which 60%? The part about not wanting an open conflict. He doesn't want a war. Wars are expensive. He accepted the coffee she put in front of him. But the remaining 40%, the part about backing away completely, I don't believe. So we're not safe. You are safer than you were yesterday. The explicit threat has been named, which means the cost of acting on it has increased. But safe as in this is over. He paused. Not yet. She sat down across from him. Tell me what you need from me. There is an event next week, the annual summit of the 5 major Chicago families. I go every year. I have always gone alone. He paused. This year I would like you with me. She waited. Gallo will be there. Every major player in this city will be there. If I arrive with you, not as a contract, not as a performance, but as my wife, in the fullest sense of what that word should mean, it changes the calculation for anyone considering whether my position has weakened. He looked at her. It also puts you in the same room as Gallo, which is a risk. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But you'll be there. Yes. And Marcus. Yes. And the 40 people I won't be able to see who are ours. Something moved in his expression. Approximately. Yes. She wrapped her hands around her own mug, looked at the table, looked back up. I want a new dress. He blinked. It was the most unguarded moment she had seen from him in weeks. What? If I'm walking into a room full of people who are going to assess every detail of me, I want a dress that doesn't give them anything to work with except the fact that I belong where I'm standing. She raised an eyebrow. I don't know how this works, Alexander. Armor takes different forms. I want mine to be the right color. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said, Adela is the person to call. She knows every designer in the city, and she will fight personally anyone who tries to put you in the wrong shade of anything. Tell her burgundy, Emily said, or something close. I'll tell her. And tell her I'm not trying to look like I belong in your world. I'm trying to look like I don't need anyone's approval to be in it. I'll tell her that too, he said. And the look in his eyes was something she had no word for yet, but was beginning to understand was meant specifically for her. Timestamp 32 minutes. Adela came the next morning with 3 dresses, a strong opinion about every one of them, and the energy of someone who had been waiting for an excuse to do exactly this. The first one is exquisite, but it's trying too hard, Adela said, holding it up. It says I've been planning this entrance for weeks. That's not what we want. What do we want? Emily said. We want I walked in because I felt like it, and I look like this always. Adela held up the second. This one, look at it. It was a deep wine red close to burgundy, but richer, the color of something that had been decided on and not second-guessed. The cut was clean, not elaborate, not performing. Emily put it on. Adela stood back and looked at her with the satisfaction of someone who has just proven a point she has been making for years. Alexander doesn't know what's about to happen to him, she said. We have a contract, Emily said, reaching back to check the zipper. I know about the contract, Adela said. I reviewed the contract. I also have eyes. And so does every other person in that man's life. She met Emily's gaze in the mirror. How do you feel? Emily looked at herself. She looked at the woman in the mirror, tired real, not a performance. Like I can walk into any room, she said. Good, Adela said. That's exactly right. The night before the summit, Lily had a nightmare. Emily heard her at 2 in the morning and went to her immediately the way she always had. Immediate, no hesitation, 4 steps down the hall and through the door, and Lily was sitting up in bed with her eyes wide and her breathing fast. I'm here, Emily said. I've got you. What happened? There were men, Lily said, outside my school in the dream. Emily's blood went cold. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled Lily in and held her. It was a dream, she said, just a dream. Were there really men outside my school? Lily said, muffled against Emily's shoulder. Emily held very still. What makes you ask that? Sophia's mom said something to the other moms. She said she saw new people there last week. More than usual. She thought maybe it was because of the safety thing the school has sent home. Lily pulled back and looked at her mother. Was it because of us? Emily looked at her daughter, at the 7-year-old face that was old enough to be asking the question and young enough to still need the answer to be survivable. Some of it was because of us, Emily said. Yes. Because of the man you married. Because of the situation we're in, which is temporary, which is already getting better. Are we in danger? Emily cupped her daughter's face in both hands. I am doing everything to make sure we are not. And Alexander is doing the same thing. And Marcus is outside right now. Do you understand? Lily looked at her. Do you trust him, Alexander? Yes, Emily said, no hesitation. Lily thought about this with the serious attention she brought to important decisions. Okay, she said. I trust him too. Then she reached over and picked up Romano the horse and tucked it under her arm and looked at the button eye Alexander had sewn and said, the knot held. It held, Emily agreed. He's getting better. He is. Lily lay back down. Emily tucked her in and sat beside her until her breathing evened out. Then she sat in the dark for a long time. She pulled out her phone. It was 2:40 in the morning. She should not text him. 2:40 in the morning, and he needed sleep before the summit. She texted him anyway. Lily's okay. Just a nightmare. She said she trusts you. The response came in less than 40 seconds, which meant he had not been sleeping either. Tell her Romano's button eye is proof I'm reliable. Emily stared at her phone. Then she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. She texted back, I'll tell her in the morning. Then get some sleep. Tomorrow matters. His response, so does tonight. She sat with that for a long time. I'm stamped 42 minutes. The summit was held in a private dining venue in the Gold Coast, the kind of establishment that did not advertise its existence and whose staff were selected for their discretion as much as their skill. Emily had been to the neighborhood before. She had delivered catering there once 3 years ago, standing in the service entrance with trays while people who lived in buildings with doormen moved through the lobby without looking at her. She was not thinking about that as she walked in. She was thinking about what Adela had said. Any room, Alexander had her hand on his arm, not possessively, not performatively. The way you carry something that matters to you. She could feel the controlled tension in him, the specific alertness of a man who was watching every entry point and every face while appearing to watch none of them, and she matched it with her own calm, because that was what he needed beside him tonight. 40 people, approximately, the 5 families and their senior associates. Adela across the room, already positioned near the bar, with the expression of someone who had a very good view of the entrance. Marcus by the far door. Gallo arrived 12 minutes after they did. I was not what she had pictured. She had pictured Victor Marchetti's kind of aggression, large visible occupying space by force. Gallo was 55, compact and precise. He looked at her when he came in the way someone looks at a document they need to read carefully. Not dismissive, not aggressive, calculating. She held his gaze for exactly as long as it took to communicate that she saw him seeing her, and then she turned to the woman on her left and continued the conversation she had been having about the best bakeries in Lincoln Park. Alexander beside her did not visibly react, but his hand pressed briefly on her arm, which she had come to understand was his version of well done. The dinner went carefully. Gallo positioned himself across the room and made no direct move, which Alexander had predicted, and which was the correct play. Gallo was smart enough not to create a scene in this room. The risk was not here. The risk was the information that would travel out of this room and what people decided to do with it. Victor Marchetti arrived late, which was also deliberate, and spent 40 minutes working the room before he came to stand near Alexander and Emily and said with the smile of a man who has prepared his material, "You clean up beautifully, Ms. Carter, almost like you belong here." Emily smiled at him. "Almost is an interesting word choice, Victor. I thought you'd appreciate precision." "I do, and what's precise is that every person in this room has been watching me tonight and making a decision. And the decision most of them have reached," she tilted her head slightly, "is that I'm not going anywhere, which is what Alexander needed them to see." She met his eyes. "So thank you for the compliment. It confirms we accomplished what we came here for." Victor stared at her. Alexander looked at the room with the expression of someone who has just watched something extraordinary and is making no effort to conceal how extraordinary he finds it. Victor said quietly, "You're not what I expected." "No," Emily said pleasantly. "I'm not." He walked away. Adela appeared at Emily's shoulder 6 seconds later. "I need you to know," Adela said, "that I have been waiting 20 years to see someone say that to Victor Marchetti." "I meant every word," Emily said. "I know, that's why it worked." Adela looked at Alexander. "You should keep her." I'm working in, Alexander said. Emily glanced at him. He was looking at the room again, but the corner of his mouth was doing something she had started to recognize as his version of a smile. And she had to look away because this was a professional event and she needed to retain some composure. Timestamp 50 minutes. They left the summit at 10:30. In the car, it was quiet in the specific way of two people who have been in a high-stakes situation together for 3 hours and are only now allowing themselves to exhale. Marcus drove. Lily at home with Rosa. Emily leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Victor, Alexander said after several minutes. He started it. I know. A pause. You finished it more effectively than I would have. You would have finished it with one look and he would have felt it for a week. I finished it with a sentence and he had to stand there and take it, which was worse for him. Yes, she said. That was the point. Another silence. Silence. Emily, she opened her eyes. Earlier, he said, you said later. She sat up. The car was dark except for the lights of the city coming through the window, and he was looking at her with the full, unguarded attention that she had learned he reserved for things that were not about strategy or management or survival. I know what I said, she said. I need you to know something. He turned in his seat to face her fully. The contract, the 2-year arrangement, I need you to know that is not what this is for me. It has not been what this is for me for some time. She waited. I don't know how to say this the way other people say it, he said. I haven't said it. I don't have the practice for it. But I can tell you that for the first time in 11 years, I came home because I wanted to and not because I lived there. I can tell you that a child who named a horse after my last name is one of the most meaningful things anyone has ever inadvertently done for me. I can tell you, he stopped. I can tell you that when Donovan showed me those photographs outside the school, what I felt was not a strategic problem. It was fear, the kind you feel for something that belongs to you, that matters to you in a way that has nothing to do with logic. The city moved past the window. I know, she said quietly. I don't want you to leave in 2 years, he said. I want you to know that clearly. I am not good at asking for things I'm not sure I can have, but I can tell you clearly what I want, and I want you to stay. She looked at him for a long moment. I have a condition, she said. He waited. Be this, she said, the person who sews button eyes badly and comes to breakfast and texts back at 2:40 in the morning. Be this and not just the person the council sees. Her voice was steady. I can live in your world. I've been living in it, but I need the world inside this car to be real. It is real, he said. It's the only thing that is. Then yes, she said. He looked at her. Yes, she said again. I'll stay. Neither of them moved. Then she reached over and took his hand in both of hers, the same way she held Lily's hand, not looking down, not checking automatic, certain a grip that said, I know where you are. He did not move for a moment. Then his hand turned and held hers back. They did not say anything else. Marcus drove. The city slid past, and in the back of a car in Chicago, two people who had both spent years being told they were not quite enough sat in the dark and held on. Across the city, in an office that smelled of old wood and cold ambition, a man named Gallo picked up his phone and made a call. The summit was a loss, he said. Romano presented united, the wife held. A pause. Move to the contingency. The person on the other end said 2 words. Gallo hung up. He sat for a moment. Then he wrote down an address. It was the address of Lily's school. The call came at 7:43 in the morning. Emily was in the kitchen. Alexander had already left for a meeting on the north side. Lily was upstairs putting on her shoes, arguing with herself about whether the left shoe felt right or the right shoe felt wrong. A daily philosophical debate that added 4 minutes to every morning departure. Rosa answered the intercom at the front gate. Her face changed. Emily saw it from across the kitchen. That specific change, the color leaving the mouth going tight, and she was already moving before Rosa turned around. What? Emily said. It's the school, Rosa said. There's something happening at the school. Emily had her phone out before Rosa finished the sentence. She called Alexander. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he had already been called, which meant whatever was happening had already been reported up the chain. Tell me Lily is still upstairs, he said. His voice was controlled. It was the most frightening version of his voice. She's upstairs. She hasn't left yet. Emily was already at the foot of the stairs. Lily, come down right now. I'm almost ready. Right now, Lily. The tone reached her. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs with one shoe in her hand. Don't go to school today, Alexander said into Emily's ear. Keep her inside, I'm turning around. What's happening at the school? A pause. 1 second. The pause of a man choosing between full information and protective filtering and deciding because he knew her to give her the truth. Two of Gallo's men were positioned outside the building at 7:15. Our people intercepted them before any contact was made with students. No one was hurt, but it was the contingency play. He moved on the school. Emily's hand tightened on the phone so hard her knuckles went white. She kept her voice even because Lily was now standing in front of her, looking up with the alert, reading eyes of a child who has learned to interpret her mother's silences. Understood, she said. We're staying in. She hung up. She looked at Lily. She said, no school today, surprise day off. Lily studied her face. Mom? Yeah, baby. Is it the thing you and Alexander are dealing with? Emily crouched down so they were eye level. She had promised herself she would not lie to her daughter. She had also promised herself she would not let her daughter carry weight that belonged to adults. The line between those two promises was very thin this morning. There's a situation being handled. You're safe here. Marcus is outside and I'm right here and Alexander is on his way home. Lily looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, okay. She sat down on the bottom and started putting on her shoe. Can Rosa make the good pancakes? I think Rosa would be very open to that, Emily said. She stood up. She turned away from her daughter so Lily would not see her face. She breathed. Then she went to find Marcus. Timestamp 8 minutes. Alexander arrived back at the mansion at 8:20. He came through the front door and went directly to Emily, who was in the sitting room with her phone and a legal pad full of notes she'd been taking since the call because organizing information was what she did when the alternative was falling apart. He sat down across from her. She's all right. She's eating pancakes with Rosa and explaining the correct way to flip them. Emily looked up. Tell me everything, he told her. Gallo's contingency had been a soft approach, not violence, not an abduction attempt. 2 men positioned outside the school with instructions to make visible contact with the school's administration and mention that they were associates of people who had concerns about a specific student's family connections. The goal was to create institutional pressure to make the school afraid to create a situation where Lily's enrollment became complicated to give Emily something to lose that wasn't connected to the legal structures Alexander controlled. It was smart. It was the kind of pressure that didn't leave fingerprints. He wanted to make us feel it without giving us a legal move, Emily said. Yes, and to send a message that no space we occupy is outside his reach. Alexander looked at her. Our people moved before the contact was made. The school administration doesn't know anything happened. Lily's enrollment is untouched. This time, she said. This time he agreed, which means the next move has to end this. Not contain it, end it. What does that look like? He was quiet for a moment. Gallo wants a council seat. That has been the goal from the beginning. The hard drive, Kevin, the pressure on you and Lily, it's all been leveraged toward that one objective. He paused. I've been treating him as a threat to eliminate, but he's a strategist. And strategists respond to a different kind of move. She looked at him. You're going to give him what he wants. I'm going to give him a version of what he wants, he said. A seat at a table, an associate position, not full council membership. Enough to be a win he can present to his organization. Enough to make continued aggression toward my family an act of war against someone who just did him a favor. He paused. In exchange, he withdraws completely, signs an accord, and acknowledges in front of witnesses that you and Lily are untouchable. Will he take it? He'll be angry. He wanted a full seat, but a smart man takes 60% of what he wants and calls it a victory. He met her eyes. And I will make very clear that the alternative to 60% is 0% and a great deal of additional difficulty. She was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? Nothing, he said. Not for this part. Alexander. Nothing dangerous, I promise you. That's not what I asked. She put the legal pad down. I asked what you need from me because I've been sitting here for 40 minutes making notes and feeling useless, and I need to be doing something. He looked at her. There's a call I need to make to the council. Explaining the situation and my proposed resolution. Adela will be on the call. DeVito, 3 others. He paused. I would like you on the call. She blinked. Why? Because the argument I'm making to the council, is that Gallo's aggression toward my family is an aggression against the stability of the entire structure. And the strongest version of that argument, he paused, is made by the person who is the family. Not by me talking about you, by you present speaking for yourself. You want me to address the council. I want them to hear your voice, that's all. You don't need to argue anything. You just need to be there. She sat with that for a moment. She thought about the woman who had stood in her Logan Square apartment and looked Alexander Romano in the eye when everything in her was telling her to run. She thought about Victor Marchetti and the summit and what Adela had said about any room. Set up the call, she said. Timestamp 18 minutes. The council call lasted 38 minutes. Emily spoke for 4 of them. She did not perform. She did not plead. She stated in the flat, factual voice she had developed over years of talking to landlords and bill collectors and administrators who had decided she was not worth their full attention exactly what had happened, what had been done to her apartment, what had been done to her daughter's school, what Kevin Marsh had been and what his connection to Gallo meant for the security of every family at the table who had women and children and schools and routines that could be mapped. I'm not asking for protection, she said. Alexander protects his own. I'm asking this council to understand that Gallo's strategy is not a personal one. He targeted me because he thought I was the soft point in Alexander's structure. The fact that he believed a wife and a child were a weakness is information about how he sees all of you. Every person in this organization who has something they love is in Gallo's calculation a lever. She paused. You don't solve that by protecting individual levers. You solve it by making Gallo understand that pulling any lever costs more than it returns. When the call ended, there was a silence. Then Adela's voice came through. I want it noted for the record that I have been saying we needed her on these calls for 2 months. DeVito said, Romano, your wife is more effective than half of the men on this council. I know, Alexander said. The resolution is approved, Carlos said. Make the arrangement with Gallo. Have the accord signed by Friday. The call ended. Alexander set his phone on the desk. He looked at her. 4 minutes, she said. 4 minutes, he agreed. I wanted on record that I was terrified for all 4 of them. It didn't show. That's the point, she said and stood up, and her legs were shaking slightly, which she was choosing not to acknowledge. I'm going to go check on Lily. Emily, his voice caught her at the door. What you just did, the council has been resistant to everything I've proposed for 3 months. You changed the room in 4 minutes. He looked at her steadily. I want you to know what you're capable of. I want you to know it clearly. She held the door frame. I've always known what I was capable of, she said. I just needed people around me who didn't find it inconvenient. She looked at him. You're the first man in my adult life who hasn't found it inconvenient. She left him with that. Timestamp 28 minutes. The accord with Gallo was signed on Thursday, 1 day early. Gallo came to the meeting with 3 associates in the controlled expression of a man who has done the math and accepted the result. He sat across from Alexander in a room with Adela and DeVito as witnesses and reviewed the terms without speaking until the end, when he looked up and said, The woman and the child, you said untouchable. In writing, Alexander said, in front of witnesses, with consequences specified and agreed to by the full council. Gallo looked at the paper. He picked up the pen. He signed. He left without additional conversation. Adela waited until his car cleared the gate. Then she said, he'll honor it for 2 years and then test the edges. 2 years is enough time, Alexander said. For what? For everything, he said. That evening he came home to the smell of something baking and the sound of Lily at the kitchen table reading aloud to Rosa from a book about horses, explaining with some intensity that the author had gotten one specific detail about Arabians completely wrong, and she intended to write a letter about it. He stood in the doorway and watched. Emily came up beside him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She decided Rosa needed to be educated, she said quietly. Rosa looks engaged. Rosa has been listening to horse facts for 40 minutes, and I believe she has genuinely learned things. Emily glanced at him. It's done. It's done, she exhaled. Not the way you exhale when you finally finish something difficult. The way you exhale when something that has been pressing against your chest for weeks finally lifts. Okay, she said. Good. Are you okay? I'm relieved, she said, and I'm hungry. And I made focaccia again, which means I was more scared today than I admitted. You made focaccia. I made 2 loaves. I was very scared. She turned back to the kitchen. Come sit down. He followed her. He sat. Lily looked up from her book and said, Alexander, did you know that Arabian horses have one fewer vertebra than other breeds? I did not know that, he said. It's why they have shorter backs. The author of this book says it gives them a disadvantage in endurance, but that's completely wrong. It actually makes them better. She looked at him with the conviction of someone who has done the research. Sometimes being built differently makes you stronger, not weaker. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. Emily set a plate of focaccia on the table and looked at her daughter. Alexander looked at Lily. Lily had already gone back to her book, entirely unaware that she had just said something that landed in the chest of every adult in the room like a stone dropped into still water. She's 7 years old, Emily said quietly, sitting down across from him. I know, he said. She just described both of us. I know. Emily tore off a piece of focaccia, handed it to him. He took it. Alexander, she said, yes. I'm not leaving in 2 years. He looked at her. I'm telling you clearly, she said. Ma as a contract update, not as a condition, just clearly. She met his eyes. I'm not leaving. He held her gaze for a long moment. The room was warm. Rosa was listening to horse facts. The city was outside and enormous and full of everything it had always been full of. Good, he said, simply, completely. Good, she agreed. Timestamp 38 minutes. 3 weeks later, Alexander Romano stood before the full council. All 12 members, plus associates, plus the 5 family heads who attended the quarterly summit and did something no Romano had done in 22 years. He brought his family. Emily stood beside him. Lily stood beside Emily, wearing a dress Rosa had helped her pick out and holding Romano the horse under one arm because she had decided Romano went everywhere important and this qualified. The room assessed them the way rooms like this always assess things, with the cold professional attention of people who have built careers on identifying weakness. They found none. Carlo Vitale, 71 years old, who had served 3 Romano bosses and survived 4 assassination attempts, looked at the woman and the child standing at the head of the table and said to the room generally, the Romano family position is stronger today than it has been in 8 years. I want that stated on the record. Victor Marchetti said nothing. He had arrived late as always and was seated at the far end, and he said nothing, which was itself a statement. Alexander spoke for 12 minutes. He covered the Gallo Accord, the stabilization of the South Corridor, the new alliance terms with DeVito that represented the most favorable structure the Romano family had held in a decade. He spoke without notes and without performance, with the concentrated precision of someone who has been doing this long enough to do it in his sleep. And then he said something that was not on any agenda. There has been a question ongoing about succession, he said, about what a family without a biological heir represents for the future of this organization. I want to address that question directly and finally. He paused. A successor is not produced. A successor is built through time and investment in the daily choice to show up for what you are responsible for. He looked at the room. I have been building a family. Not a bloodline, a family. And that family will be the foundation of everything that comes after me. The room was quiet. Lily Carter Romano, he said, and the new name, the full name, the name Emily had not known he had filed the paperwork for until this moment, landed in the room with the weight of a declaration, is 7 years old. She is extraordinary. She will be extraordinary in ways none of us can predict. And she will carry this family's name, not because she was born to it, but because she was chosen for it, and because she chose it back. Emily had gone absolutely still. She had not known about the name. He had not told her. He had filed it legally, quietly, and he was announcing it here in this room in front of every person whose opinion would ripple outward through the entire structure of their world. She could feel Lily looking up at her. She looked down. Lily was looking at her with an expression of enormous, serious gravity. Then she said in a whisper loud enough for the 3 people nearest them to hear, "Does that mean my horse is officially Romano?" Romano, Emily pressed her lips together so hard she felt her teeth. She heard Adela across the table make a sound that was not professional at all. Alexander looked at Lily with the expression of a man who is being unmade and rebuilt simultaneously and has no complaints about the process. "Yes," he said quietly. "I believe that's what it means." Lily considered this. "That's a very good name," she said, and hugged the horse tighter, satisfied. Carlo Vitale, who had not smiled in a professional setting in 11 years, smiled. Timestamp 48 minutes. After the summit at the car, Lily fell asleep against Emily's shoulder within 6 minutes, the boneless, total sleep of a child who has been very important all day and is now done. Emily looked out the window. Alexander was watching her. "You filed it without telling me," she said. Her voice was not accusatory, it was wondering. "Yes." "Why?" "I was quiet for a moment, because I needed to do something that wasn't conditional. Everything between us has been structured, the contract, the terms, the negotiated conditions. I needed to do one thing that was just decided, not bargained for." He paused. "If you'd said no, I would have reversed it. But I needed to follow it first. To do it from the side that isn't asking for anything back." She looked at him. "That might be the most Alexander Romano thing you've ever done." "It might be," he said. "It's also the most romantic." He looked genuinely uncertain how to receive that which she found more endearing than she could reasonably justify. "She gets to decide," Emily said, "when she's older, if she wants to keep it. That has to be real." "Of course," he said. "It was always going to be her choice. But she should have the choice to make." Emily looked at her daughter sleeping against her shoulder, at the stuffed horse tucked under Lily's arm with its repaired button eye, the knot that had held. She thought about Kevin, about Logan Square, about a legal pad with numbers that never added up and a card with a phone number on it that she almost didn't call. She thought about the specific, irreducible fact that every bad thing that had happened had led to this exact moment. She was not grateful for the bad things, but she was here, and here was good, and that was enough. "Alexander," she said, "yes, I need you to know something." She looked at him. "You told me what you wanted in the car after the summit. You said you wanted me to stay." She paused. "But you didn't say the other thing." He looked at her steadily. "I know. Say it now." He was quiet for a moment. The city moved outside the window. Marcus drove without turning his head. Then Alexander Romano, who had spent 11 years choosing the performance over the truth, who had armored himself so completely that most people had forgotten. There was a person underneath, looked at Emily Carter and said simply and entirely without hedging, "I love you." She held his gaze. "I know," she said, and then, "I love you too." Lily stirred slightly, did not wake. Marcus kept his eye on the road and said nothing, but the set of his shoulders changed in the specific way of a man who has been hoping for something for a long time and has just heard it arrive. Nobody said anything else. The car moved through Chicago, through the neighborhoods Emily had walked and struggled and survived, and past the corner where the pharmacy was, and the street where Lily's school stood, and the intersection where the diner was that she'd worked at before everything changed. The city was the same city. It was a completely different world. Timestamp 56 minutes. 6 months later, the Romano family held a dinner. Not a council meeting, not a summit, not a structured event with agendas and family heads and people calculating leverage. A dinner at the mansion for the people who mattered. Rosa made the cold cuts because it turned out she agreed with Adela's position on receptions entirely. Marcus sat at the table for the first time instead of standing near the door because Emily had told him 4 times that he was family, and on the 5th time had simply set a place for him and looked at him until he sat down. Adela brought wine that was significantly better than anything the occasion required and said that was simply how she did things. DeVito came with his wife, who turned out to be a woman named Barbara, who had a laugh you could hear from 3 rooms away and who immediately identified Lily as a person of excellent taste and judgment and spent 40 minutes discussing horses with her in the serious, committed way of someone who has been waiting their whole life for this specific conversation. Victor Marchetti was not invited. Victor Marchetti had over the preceding 6 months quietly removed himself from active council participation and relocated his primary operations to another city, which was not entirely unrelated to a very specific conversation he had had with Alexander after the summit that no one else had been present for and that neither man discussed publicly. Gallo sent a bottle of wine and a note that was civil, which was the clearest possible signal that the accord was holding. Lily sat at the head of the table because she had declared it the best seat and no one had found a compelling argument against this. And she sat there with Romano, the horse propped against her water glass, and explained to Barbara that Romano had 1 fewer button eye than originally designed, but that the replacement was structurally superior, and she had supervised the installation personally. Barbara said that was excellent quality control. Lily said she thought so too. Alexander sat at Emily's side and watched the room and felt something he did not have precise language for, Not happiness exactly, because happiness was a thing that came and went, and this was more structural than that. This was a load-bearing feeling, the kind that everything else could rest on. Emily leaned slightly against his shoulder, not looking at him, just there. I had spent 39 years believing that the things that mattered to him were his empire, his position, the structure his grandfather had built and his father had maintained, and he had expanded through a decade of discipline and sacrifice, and the specific loneliness of a man who tells himself he has chosen his priorities and believes it until the night someone rearranges his kitchen and makes pasta and looks at him like he is a person rather than a position. He had been wrong about his priorities for a very long time. He was not wrong anymore. Later, after the guests had gone, and Rosa was managing the kitchen with the satisfied efficiency of someone who has overseen a successful operation, and Marcus was helping Lily locate Romano, who had gone missing between the dinner table and the sitting room, and had been found ultimately under a chair where Lily had left her during the great button-eye relocation crisis of the evening, Alexander found Emily standing in the hallway outside Lily's room. The door was open slightly. Lily was in bed asleep already, with Romano restored and correctly positioned. "She's out," Emily said quietly. "Good dinner," he said. "Barbara is wonderful." "She is." "Lily is going to request a horse-related gift from her for every birthday for the rest of her life." "Probably." She turned and looked at him. In the soft light of the hallway, without the armor of a public setting or the sharpness of a crisis, she was exactly what she had always been, and what he had been too slow to name the most complete person he had ever met. Not because she was uncomplicated, because she was complicated in ways that were honest, and she carried them without pretending they weren't there. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Tell me. When you came to my door that night in Logan Square," she held his gaze. "I opened it without thinking. I didn't check. I just opened it. And I've thought about that 100 times since then, how close I was to not opening it, or opening it and shutting it again, or calling the police the moment you were gone and starting the whole thing in a different direction. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She tilted her head slightly. "I think about the version of myself who didn't open the door, and I feel sorry for her." She paused. "Not because she would have missed you specifically, but because she would have missed finding out what she was actually capable of. The version of herself that could walk into any room." He looked at her. "You didn't make me that person," she said clearly. "I was already her, but you gave me a room large enough to be her in. And that's not a small thing. That's not something I will ever be casual about." He reached up and touched her face once briefly, the way he touched things he was certain of. "You walked into my kitchen," she said, "in a suit that cost more than my rent, and you held a mug that said world's okayest human, and you didn't even blink. I knew then." "Knew what?" "That you were going to be trouble," she said. "I am," he agreed. "The good kind," she said. And she meant it without reservation, without calculation, without any part of herself holding back. He pulled her in, and she let him, and the hallway was quiet, and Lily was sleeping, and the horse named Romano was correctly positioned, and the city was outside doing what cities do. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Alexander Romano had built an empire through discipline and sacrifice, and the willingness. Alexander Romano had built an empire through discipline and sacrifice, and the willingness to stand alone. He had believed for most of his adult life that standing alone was the price of power, that the things other men had, the kitchen table, the sleeping child, the woman who reorganized your counters, and was right about the cutting boards, those things were not for men like him. He had been wrong. He had been wrong about almost everything that mattered. And for the first time in 39 years, being wrong was the best thing that had ever happened to him. The man who could not be chosen learned in the end that the right person doesn't choose you despite who you are. She chooses you because of who you become in the space she makes for you. And a woman who had been told her whole life that she was not enough finally understood, standing in a mansion that had become a home, that she had always been exactly enough. She had simply been waiting for the room where that was true. She had found it. They had built it, and no one was ever going to take it from them again.